Hey everyone, my name is Will, and I like to talk about music. Today I'm going to be doing a review of the latest album from Beth Gibbons, Lives Outgrown. This is the latest studio album from Beth Gibbons, who is very well known for her work in the acclaimed trip hop act Portishead in the 90s and 2000s. The group is famous for records such as Dummy as well as Third, and if you listen to one of these landmark records in the genre, you will realize how incredible and essential Beth Gibbons' vocals are to the band's sound. Gibbons does not drop very frequently as a solo artist, as her last project, titled Out of Season, came over 20 years ago. However, she has had notable features since then, most recently on Kendrick's latest project, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, which actually turned out to be an extremely beautiful and essential contribution to the record, in my opinion. Her last studio album was actually a collaboration between herself and bassist Paul Webb from the legendary band Talk Talk, who went under the name Rustin Man. This may explain the art rock and post-rock influences that are present in the production and instrumentation on this latest album. I would say, coming off of the Portishead material, don't go into this album thinking you're going to get a similar sound in terms of the production, because this is much more mysterious and embraces a more post-rock feel, even jazzy at times as well. There's also an extreme attention to detail to the choices of instrumentation used throughout this record that is quite admirable. There's also a wide variety of sounds present from the instrumentation, from the intricate percussion parts, acoustic and electric guitar, woodwinds, and strings. These elements provide a beautiful instrumental current under Beth Gibbons' vocals, which are carefully delivered with subtlety and nuance throughout. She also explores these themes of the passing of time, childhood. The opener, Tell Me Who You Are Today, stays relatively quiet and dynamic, but it's actually an intensely spiritual opener. The song saturates you in an instrumental atmosphere that sounds like an incredibly focused meditation, with its subtle percussion grooves, the soft textures from the strings and woodwinds, the minimalist guitar chord progression, to even using dulcimer in the latter half. The second half of the track also offers an even darker tone, with its weeping, descending string lines. The lyrics also support these themes, as a line such as "If I could make my body heal" suggests that this intense meditation is to free the mind spiritually in a way, and is being used for a therapeutic purpose, perhaps. The second track that follows this, Floating on a Moment, feels like I'm being transported to a different world entirely, some kind of fantasy world that you would see out of a storybook, which is also notable with the inclusion of children's choir on this track as well. That is quite beautiful. I also love the inclusions of vibraphone that ring off throughout the production, the inclusion of woodwinds as well. The track constantly has this feeling that it's going somewhere, both writing-wise and just in terms of its atmosphere, and in this respect I feel like I am basically floating in mid-air while listening to it. Burden of Light features incredible performances that contribute to a darkness similar to what the opener was trying to articulate, but perhaps even more intensely. And I think this track is the more successful execution than the opener, with its subtle but harrowing vocal refrain and deep guitar tones throughout as well. The instrumental bridge is also a tasteful addition to the progression of the track, with the intense string lines that communicate a true sense of uneasiness. Lost Changes is an absolutely stellar moment as well, that has a sense of longing to it, both lyrically and musically, specifically hinting at a desire for love in some certain relationship. The outro features the most pivotal line on the cut, where Gibbons sings, "All that I want you to want me the way that you used to, and all that I want is to love you the way that I used to." I also love the way that the back vocals loom in the background on the final moments of the track. There's an immaculate attention to detail in all the instrumentation all throughout this album, as I said before, and it is especially evident here, where in the verses you get the suspended cymbal effects, the hand percussion, and it also sounds like there may be use of a piano along with the guitar as well. There are just so many little details in the instrumentation that you can go back to while re-listening to the album and find out so many things that were just carefully considered in terms of the instrumentation and arrangements on this album. The album's influences from post-rock are clearly present on the track Rewind. This song embraces a primal sound with its repetitive guitar line and tribal drum rhythms. This may be hinting at the picture it's trying to paint lyrically, which reads to me as being centered around the way that we have progressed and evolved as a species, while also possibly hinting at the collapse and demise of humanity in the future. There's a clear notion that we cannot turn back from what we have already done, and I think in this way you could either interpret this as being a separate theme about humanity in general, but it could also be relating to the project as well, as Beth Gibbons is trying to reconcile with something from the past, but it doesn't entirely matter because it's already behind her and she cannot change the things that have already happened. The themes of desire for love that were set up on Lost Changes evolve into desperation on the following track, Reaching Out. The feeling of desperation is enhanced through the use of an urgent and quick instrumental set up by the rhythm section. I think it's fair to say this is one of the most intense and best grooves present on the album, and maybe one of the most upbeat tracks in general, but instead of just being upbeat, it's still an intensely dark track. There's the use of sharp brass stabs throughout, and the haunting sounds of weeping strings and piano lines. On Oceans, I feel a similar feeling of transportation that was heard on Floating on a Moment, with the constant activity in the guitars and percussion. It is also fair to say that this is one of the most cinematic moments on the album as well, with the string section's repetitive descending lines throughout the end of the track. There's also something quite dramatic and even epic and grand about their use here. There's also another gorgeous use of strings on the following track, For Sale, which even features a violin solo during an instrumental bridge. The track is yet another heavy moment on the album that is quite pessimistic in its outlook on dreams. It seems to give a warning to the listener, as if saying, be careful what you wish for, things don't always turn out how you envision them. There's even a few lines where Beth Gibbons literally speaks to the listener in the second person, which makes it even more intimate in my opinion, such as a line like, just ask yourself, how would you like life to be? Beyond the Sun could be considered one of the most instrumentally centered cuts on the record, especially as it is centered around one of the heaviest and hypnotic grooves. It also features a pretty lengthy instrumental bridge that features a variety of different woodwind instruments soloing all at once. There's a saxophone in there, there's a flute in there, and they're all just basically going at once, and it creates this weird sense of cacophony, but it comes together in quite a beautiful way. There are a few bits of electronic instrumentation used throughout as well, which are only used in certain pockets of the album, but I think they're really used well and effectively here. The use of dulcimer comes back in this track as well, and there's maybe even a bit of distortion on the metallic percussion. The closer, Whispering Love, is essentially the resolution of all the dark thoughts and imagery that were present on the prior tracks. This is expressed throughout with the simplistic guitar parts and singing flute lines. This resolution is clearly achieved by some kind of reconciliation with the past, perhaps childhood experiences, as we saw from a track like Floating on a Moment. The themes on this album may also be alluding to the acceptance of the darkness in the world, or the misfortune in the world, and how we have to move past them, and we have to look at the dark things that have happened before moving on to something new, which is basically why we have achieved this resolution of the closer, Whispering Love. Things will not always turn out how you envision them to, but it is essential to combat your personal struggles to find a sense of inner peace, which this closer definitely seems to accomplish. Now, there's only a couple nitpicks I could really have with this album, and they really all just come in the opener, which is still a track that I love and I think sets up a great atmosphere and tone for the project, quite harrowing and quite intense in terms of its spiritual themes and meditative themes. But I think the material is a little bit middling in its progression. It somewhat reaches a climax, but doesn't necessarily leave with the greatest impression as a track isolated from the rest of the album. I think it definitely sets a tone, but it doesn't feel as fleshed out as some of the other material here. But other than that, I cannot really complain about what Beth Gibbons has done on this project, as it's such a personal album, but just such a beautiful and moving project as well. While Beth Gibbons may not release project after project every year, it seems that whenever she has a contribution in music, it just turns out to be incredibly stellar, and that's the sign of a true artist. This is just a gorgeous record that I highly recommend, and it's probably my favorite album of the year so far. And with all that being said, I'm feeling a 9+ on this album. But what do you think about this album? Have you given it a listen? Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. Is there any other musical content you want to see? Anything I should review next? Rank next? Any discographies that you want to see as well? Let me know all of that down below in the comments. This has been Will's Music Review. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.